Hi everybody, here is part one of your online lecture for the rest of the early to mid 20th century unit. I'm going to talk about the 4 architectural works that are in this unit right now, and hopefully I can do this all in one shot. I'm using Camtasia for the first time, so let's see if I can figure it out. But anyways, here's the first work of architecture that we're going to study for this unit, and it's by an architect named Le Corbusier, and it's called the Villa Savoie, and it's in France in the year 1929. Le Corbusier is a very famous kind of rock star of modernist architectural history. He was a champion of something called the International style. And here's his most famous work is the Villa Savoie, and as you can see, it's very minimalist, kind of pared down. It was super revolutionary in its time. Here's a shot of the interior. And then, yeah, so Le Corbusier was a great sort of theorist of modernism, and he believed in modernity and the future and sort of the capacity for modern design to improve people's lives. And this house was supposed to be a sort of like a testament to that. And he's famous for saying that a house should be a machine for living. And so this house is probably the best example for that. So if you look at the house, it has these narrow little columns that hold it up. These are called pilotis. And the pilotis are kind of a trademark Le Corbusier style feature. And they kind of make the house look like it's floating, if you can tell. And so the bottom floor, this is 2 stories, 3 stories, 2 main stories with like a terrace on top. And the bottom story is circular, and it's made to be approached by car. It's hard to tell because it's painted to be dark, but it's circular and it's a carport, and it's made so the family who lives in the house can just exit the car and go right into the building. And it's painted this dark green color to make the house look like it's floating. The inside, I don't have a lot of pictures of the interior, but it's very flowy. There's a ramp that goes up to all the levels, and there's also this spiral staircase, and there's a lot of open spaces. There's not a lot of walls. There's a lot of furniture that's built into the walls. It's really kind of minimalist in the, the arrangement of things. So, if you look at the windows, they're called ribbon windows because it's in like a strip along the 2nd floor. And let's see, what else can we tell you about this? And it's really meant to integrate the outdoors with the indoors. In this bottom picture here, this is a terrace that basically opens right up from the 2nd floor, and it's meant to be like an outdoor room. Le Corbusier is really famous for believing that in this modern lifestyle that we would spend much more time outside, that it was better for your health, that, that was part of the modern lifestyle, was to spend a lot of time outside. So that's the Villa Savoie. He has a lot of other buildings. Oh, okay, so I mentioned that he's very much a theorist of modern architecture, and so he published a book in 1923 called Tour d'Architecture, and he talks about different things that sort of inform his ideas to modern architecture now. And he would talk about the wonderful qualities of all the symbols of modernity, like race cars and airplanes, and they had the shapes and forms that we needed to have the most efficient modern lifestyle. But he also loved classical architecture, and he said that the classical forms that people were were made by the classical cultures, the Greek and Roman cultures, they also had the kind of timelessness that we needed in modern architecture. So he sort of worships all the new modern inventions, but he also is informed by classical architecture as a huge influence. Here's another one of his buildings. I just stuck that in there for my kids playing video games in the background, if you hear that. here's another one of his buildings. I included it just for reference. So you can see the ribbon windows, the strip going across the facade, the really angular geometric quality of his buildings. In modernism, they're really, there's in international style in particular, they're really against the idea of ornamentation and sticking extra stuff on there that they don't need. They thought that buildings should be pared down, that the white color and the simplicity was sort of better for living. It just, you know, kind of echoes back to that idea of like health and simplicity in this modern lifestyle. The small little pilotis, pillars that hold up the second level to kind of make it look light and airy, almost like it's floating. So his style is really, really distinctive, and it is, you know, developed mostly in the 1920s, and it took off in popularity. And we're going to look at another building later that was part of the international style. It was really influential, and, you know, I think when people think of modern architecture, Le Corbusier is sort of like the trademark look that people think of. Even though these were made in the 1920s, you know, it still looks futuristic if you look at it. So as I go through this, I'm just throwing in some of the notes from Behrens too, to just kind of give you a little more language to talk about it. If you look at the house, it looks like a box. It's kind of horizontal. It also looks like it's floating. You know, modernism is a lot of modernism is about abstraction, and this is like the abstraction of a house because it's so simplified. So here's some more notes. You guys can go through it. And it's important to think about this in terms of what other houses we've looked at historically. So like the House of the Veti, or the Palazzo Rucellai or Falling Water. We're going to look at Falling Water next. So here's the next one in our list. This is Falling Water, also called the Edgar J. Kaufman House. Edgar J. Kaufman was the patron. This is known as the most famous house in the United States. You can see how beautiful it is. Edgar J. Kaufman was a corporate executive, I think, for like an automotive company. He was a very rich CEO. And he commissioned Frank Lloyd Wright to build his house on his property that was in a forest in Pennsylvania. And he had this beautiful location where he wanted the house to be located. And Frank Lloyd Wright, you know, he's an architectural genius. He figured out a way to build the house over the waterfall and incorporate the waterfall. So Frank Lloyd Wright is really famous for this concept of organic architecture. And he believed that humans were part of nature and that architecture should reflect that, you know, rather than creating a building that is apart from the natural surroundings or dominating it. He wanted it to be in harmony with the natural surroundings. So if you look at the forms and the textures that Wright uses in this building, you can really get a sense for how harmoniously it does live within this forest. So as you can see, there's a lot of outdoor space. These big terraces are like big outdoor patios where you can sit and just soak up the woods. He built steps leading down to the stream so you could like go down there and wade around, or, you know, stick your feet in the water. It's really beautifully integrated with this stone. You know, it just looks like a natural extension of the environment right here. Here you can see he would build beams around a tree. You know, instead of cutting down the tree to build the house and put the beam there, he just altered his design a little bit to accommodate nature there. And if you look at the inside, you know, that rough cut stone is on the inside as well as the outside. And it really just adds to the feeling of being in the forest, even though you're in this, you know, beautiful modern house. And, you know, it's just awesome. I wish I lived here. I'm not going to lie. I've never visited, and I really hope to someday. So a couple important terms to know. Frank Lloyd Wright is associated with something called the Prairie style. He was from the Midwest, and that's kind of where he became famous. I think he's from Chicago, but, you know, he kind of worked a lot around that area, and then, you know, as his fame spread, he moved around and took commissions on the East and the West Coast. highly recommend you look up some more of his buildings because the style is very distinctive. One of the distinctive things about his style is this long, jutting out shape. This is called a cantilever. The cantilever is like a huge beam that kind of comes out and hangs over the space. And he's really stretching the limits of the engineering. You know, in fact, when he was designing this building, Edgar J. Kaufman looked at it and said, I don't know if that's going to be structurally sound. And so he took it to his engineer and said, oh no, that needs to be reinforced, you know. And Frank Lloyd Wright was a kind of an egotistical guy, and he was sort of offended that Kaufman didn't trust him, but they had to add more reinforcements to the design. And even so, you know, cracks would appear every so often in this reinforced concrete until they figured out how to hold it up with these cables from above. So it's a really dramatic design, and it's made to expand the space and to create this design where the building can literally hang over the waterfall. Another way, you know, I should have mentioned this later, the other way that he kind of reinforces the integration with nature is if you look at the building, there are no windows that face the water, or there's no walls that face the waterfall. It's all window. And it's all, you know, just looking into the forest and out over the water. So it's all about opening up the internal space to the surrounding natural beauty. Here's the design of Falling Water. There's a famous story, if you read the article on Khan Academy, there's a famous story about how when Frank Lloyd Wright got this commission, he kind of didn't do anything to design it for a very long time until he was like going to meet Kaufman. He basically drew up the design in like a few hours, which is crazy because, you know, it's such a complex and intricate design that it seems like it would take a lot longer, but he just kind of like drew it up during like a car ride on the way to meet his patron. So Frank Lloyd Wright is a genius. He's definitely the most famous American architect. Here's the floor plan. The second floor is kind of like the main floor, and you can see where the terraces come out and how far it comes out. It comes out all the way over this river, which is crazy. And you actually approach from the other side. You know, there's a spot that you don't see in as many of the photographs where you actually drive up and you enter it over here. Yeah, so that is Falling Water. Really beautiful. If you have a minute, I would Google Frank Lloyd Wright and just look at some of his other houses. He has a house in the Hollywood Hills that's designed basically after the style of a Mayan temple, and it's really cool. So check out his other work. It's beautiful.